Let's begin with something that feels obvious, almost too obvious to question. You feel time passing. You talk about saving time, wasting time, running out of time. You imagine it flowing like a river carrying you from past to future. And yet, if you stop and ask a very precise question, where is time? The confidence collapses almost immediately. You can point to a chair. You can point to a clock. You can even point to motion. But you cannot point to time itself. Richard Feynman loved questions like this because they expose a gap between language and reality. We speak as if time were a thing, but physics never actually finds it as an object. There is no substance called time flowing through the universe. There is no container labeled now that moves forward. What physics gives us instead is something far more unsettling. Time is a way of ordering events, not a thing moving past us. When one event happens before another, we say time has passed. When systems change, we mark the change with clocks. But the clock is not time. The clock is just a physical process, atoms oscillating, gears turning, that we choose to use as a reference. Time is the relationship between changes, not the change itself. This is where intuition breaks down. We confuse measurement with existence. Because we can measure time so precisely, we assume it must be something concrete. But measuring something does not guarantee it exists as an independent entity. We measure temperature too. Yet temperature is not a thing. It's a statistical description of motion. Time may be the same kind of illusion, not unreal, but emergent. Feynman was very careful about this distinction. He didn't deny time. He denied sloppy thinking about time. He emphasized that physics does not describe time as something that acts. Time doesn't push, pull, or cause. It doesn't do anything. It's a parameter, a bookkeeping device we use to keep track of how systems evolve. And that idea is deeply uncomfortable because our entire psychological experience depends on treating time as real. Memory, anticipation, regret, hope, all of it assumes a moving present, separating a fixed past from an open future. But physics never identifies a special moment called now. Every moment exists equally well in the equations. The present is not a feature of the universe, it's a feature of consciousness. That realization quietly destabilizes a lot of assumptions. If time is not flowing, then nothing is being carried away. The past is not gone in the way we imagine. The future is not waiting to arrive. Instead, reality is a vast structure of events, ordered but not animated by a universal clock. We experience motion through it because we are part of it. This reframing explains why time feels so solid and yet so elusive. You cannot stop it because there is nothing to stop. You cannot step outside it because it is not a place. You can only observe change and compare one state to another. Psychologically, this can feel disorienting. We like to think of ourselves as travelers moving through time, progressing towards something. But physics offers a colder, cleaner picture. We are patterns that persist for a while within a structured sequence of events. Our sense of passage comes from memory updating, not from time moving. Feynman found this beautiful rather than disturbing. It meant the universe wasn't hiding some invisible river dragging us along. It meant reality was simpler and stranger than the stories we tell ourselves. Time doesn't flow, things change. And that distinction matters because it shifts responsibility. If time is not pushing you forward, then movement comes from processes, not destiny. From decisions, not drift. From causes that operate within the structure, not from an external force called time. So the thought worth sitting with is this: stop imagining time as something happening to you. Start seeing it as the order in which your actions unfold. Because when you realize time isn't a thing you're trapped inside, you begin to understand something quietly empowering. That meaning doesn't come from where time takes you, but from what you choose to do within the moments that exist. Once you let go of the idea that time is a thing flowing past you, an even stranger problem appears. If time isn't moving, why does it feel like it has a direction? Why does the past feel fixed while the future feels open? Why can you remember yesterday but not tomorrow? This is where one of the deepest paradoxes in physics lives, and it's the point that fascinated Richard Feynman more than almost anything else. Here's the unsettling fact. The fundamental laws of physics do not care which way time goes. Take almost any basic equation in physics and run it backward. The math still works. Particles colliding forward in time obey the same laws as particles uncolliding backward. A swinging pendulum, a planet orbiting a star, atoms vibrating in a crystal, write the equations in reverse, and nothing breaks. There is no built-in arrow that says this way only. And yet, reality clearly has an arrow. You never see broken cups jump back onto tables. You never see smoke unmix itself from the air. You never see people grow younger while memories disappear. Something is pointing time in one direction, even though the rules themselves are indifferent. Feynman loved this contradiction because it exposed the difference between laws and experience. The laws describe what is allowed. Experience shows what actually happens. And the gap between the two is where time's arrow hides. This is psychologically disturbing because we instinctively assume that direction must come from rules. We think something must be pushing time forward, but physics offers no such push. There is no cosmic motor driving moments from past to future. The equations are perfectly symmetrical. So why isn't reality symmetrical? The answer is subtle, and it's not satisfying in the way people expect. Time's arrow doesn't come from the laws. It comes from conditions, specifically from the fact that the universe started in an extremely special, highly ordered state. From that point on, it has overwhelmingly more ways to become less ordered than more ordered. Direction emerges not from force, but from probability. This is a hard idea to sit with because it removes intention from one of the most intimate features of existence. Time feels purposeful. It feels like it's going somewhere. But physics says the arrow is a consequence, not a command. It's not written into the rules. It arises from how the game started. Feynman was very clear about this. Nothing in the equations says the future must differ from the past. The difference exists because of statistics, not destiny. Given enough particles, enough interactions, and enough time, disorder wins. Not because it wants to, but because there are more ways for it to happen. That's why time feels irreversible. This realization quietly changes how you interpret everything from aging to loss. The future isn't uncertain because time is open. It's uncertain because systems spread into many possibilities. The past isn't fixed because time locks it. It's fixed because information has already dispersed beyond recovery. Time's arrow is not a law. It's a trend, and trends don't negotiate. What makes this even more striking is that your personal experience of time, your sense of moving forward, depends entirely on this asymmetry. If the universe were perfectly reversible, memory wouldn't work, learning wouldn't work, consciousness as you know it wouldn't exist. Awareness requires a difference between what has happened and what hasn't. So the arrow of time is not something layered on top of reality. It's baked into the conditions that allow observers like you to exist at all. Feynman found this both humbling and clarifying. It meant that time's direction is not guaranteed by logic or necessity. It's contingent, fragile, a result of how improbably ordered the universe once was, and that leads to a powerful reflection. The fact that time moves forward is not a promise, it's a circumstance, one that allows change, growth, and meaning, but offers no guarantees of fairness or purpose. Time doesn't care where you're going. It only reflects the I'm be. Balance it was born into. So if there's something to take from this, it's not anxiety, it's urgency. The arrow of time isn't driven by intention, but your actions are. And in a universe where direction comes from conditions rather than design, meaning doesn't arrive from the future. It's created now by what you choose to do while the arrow still points forward. If the laws of physics don't care which way time runs, then something else must be doing the work of separating past from future. And that something is not mysterious once you see it, but it is deeply unsettling once you understand what it implies. The difference between yesterday and tomorrow comes down to one quiet, unforgiving idea: entropy. Richard Feynman often emphasized that entropy is not about messiness in the everyday sense. It's not about dirt or chaos or things going wrong. Entropy is about counting, about how many ways something can be arranged. And the uncomfortable truth is that there are vastly more ways for things to be disordered than ordered. That's it. That's the engine of time. When a glass falls and shatters, nothing in the laws of motion forbids the pieces from flying back together. The equations would allow it, but the number of possible disordered arrangements of those shards is astronomically larger than the single arrangement that makes a whole glass. The universe doesn't forbid reversal. It simply never waits long enough for it to happen. Time feels one way because probability is one way. This is where the idea becomes psychologically sharp. We tend to think the past feels different from the future because the past is gone and the future is not yet. But physics says something colder. The past feels different because entropy was lower, information was more concentrated. The future feels open because entropy will almost certainly be higher. Entropy doesn't care about meaning, it doesn't care about fairness, it doesn't care about what you wish would happen. It is a statistical fact about large numbers of particles, and it wins every time. Feynman found this both elegant and disturbing. Elegant because it explains irreversibility without inventing new laws. Disturbing because it strips time of intention. There is no cosmic rule that says things must age or things must decay. They do so because there are more ways to fall apart than to stay together. This is why fire burns, why heat flows from hot to cold, why memories form in one direction only. Memory itself is an entropy-driven process. To remember something, your brain must change physically. That change increases entropy somewhere else. You cannot remember the future because the physical record does not yet exist. So the arrow of time is not something you travel along. It's something that accumulates behind you. This reframes loss in a way that's hard to accept. When something is gone, it's not erased, it's dispersed. The information still exists in principle, but it's spread so thinly across the yuan. Iverse that it may as well be unreachable. The past isn't destroyed, it's diluted. And that's why regret feels irreversible. Entropy doesn't just explain broken cups. It explains why explanations themselves move forward, why causes precede effects, why learning changes you in ways you can't undo. Once entropy increases, there is no practical path back, not because of punishment, but because of arithmetic. This is also why time feels precious, not because it's running out like sand in an hourglass, but because low entropy states are rare. Order is fragile. Structure is temporary. The present moment feels vivid because it sits at the edge where order is still usable. Feynman never romanticized this. He didn't say entropy gives life meaning. He said entropy explains why meaning is temporary. And paradoxically, that makes it more valuable, not less. If everything were reversible, nothing would matter. No choice would stick. No action would leave a trace. The very fact that entropy locks in consequences is what allows significance to exist at all. So the reflection to leave you with is not despair. It's clarity. Time doesn't move forward because it must. It moves forward because disorder almost always wins. Which means this moment, structured, coherent, full of possibility, is not guaranteed to repeat. And once you truly understand that, you stop asking how to stop time and start asking how to use the rare ordered moments you've been given before entropy quietly carries the away. Once you accept that entropy gives time its direction, the next uncomfortable idea follows naturally, and this is where most people resist. If the arrow of time comes from statistics, not from the laws themselves, then time is not as fundamental as it feels. It's not woven into reality at the deepest level. It emerges. Richard Feynman often pointed out that the equations describing nature work just as well forward as backward. Strip away our experience, strip away memory, strip away entropy, and the universe has no preferred now. The present moment, the one that feels so solid, so obvious, is not a built-in feature of the cosmos. It's a byproduct of how information accumulates in systems like us. This is where time stops being a clock on the wall and starts becoming a psychological phenomenon. We experience time as a flowing river because our brains are recording change. Each memory is a physical imprint. Each imprint requires energy. Each expenditure of energy increases entropy. So the sensation of time passing is inseparable from the act of remembering. No memory, no flow, just states. That means the present is not a moving point traveling through time. The present is simply the state in which you are currently accumulating records of the past. Think about how radical that is. We're used to saying time moves forward, but from the universe's perspective, nothing is moving. There is no cosmic metronome ticking away seconds. There are only configurations of partie, class changing, and creatures like us labeling those changes as before and after. Feynman was careful here. He didn't say time is an illusion in the sense that it doesn't exist. He said it's not fundamental. And there's a big difference. Money isn't fundamental either, but it still shapes your life. Language isn't fundamental, but you can't think without it. Time is like that, real in experience, emergent in origin. This explains something deeply human, why the present feels so thin. You can't hold on to it. The moment you try to grasp now, it's already memory. That's not a poetic failure, it's a physical necessity. The act of noticing requires time. By the time awareness arrives, entropy has already increased. So the present isn't something you stand in. It's something that collapses the instant you look at it. This also dismantles the idea that time is out there waiting for you. There is no future laid out like a road. There are only higher entropy states that are more likely to occur. Possibility is not a place you're headed. It's a probability distribution. And psychologically, this changes responsibility. If the future isn't pre-written, then your actions are not moving you toward destiny. They're shaping which probabilities become real. Each choice nudges the universe toward one set of outcomes instead of another, not by magic, by physics. This is why the illusion of time can feel oppressive or liberating, depending on how you see it. If you believe time is a company, conveyor belt dragging you helplessly forward, you feel trapped. But if time is an emergent property of change, and change responds to action, then agency returns. Feynman loved this perspective because it refused comfort without denying wonder. He didn't replace fate with fantasy. He replaced it with responsibility. The universe doesn't guarantee meaning, but it allows it, briefly, locally, and at great cost, and that cost is entropy. Every moment of clarity, every act of creation, every thought that organizes the world even slightly is pushing uphill against probability. Order is never free. Awareness is never permanent. The present exists only because something is actively holding it together. Which brings us to the quiet conclusion hiding underneath all of this. The present is not precious because it's mystical. It's precious because it's fragile. You don't lose time because it runs out. You lose it because structure dissolves. So if time is not a river carrying you forward, but a pattern you're participating in, then the question is no longer where is time going? The real question becomes far more demanding. What are you doing with the rare ordered moment that exists only while you are paying attention to it? Once you see time as something that emerges rather than something that commands, another unsettling realization appears, one that Richard Feynman kept circling without ever trying to soften. The laws of physics do not care about meaning, intention, or purpose. And yet, here we are, creatures who live as if time owes us something. We plan, we rush, we regret. We talk about wasting time as though it were a resource handed to us by the universe with instructions attached. But physics never made that promise. Time does not come with a user manual. It doesn't tell you what matters. It only allows processes to unfold. This is where the conversation turns psychological in a serious way. Most of our anxiety comes from treating time as a judge instead of a condition. We imagine time watching us, measuring us, evaluating whether we are on track. But time has no track. There is no cosmic schedule you're falling behind on. That pressure is entirely human-made. Feynman was deeply suspicious of stories we tell ourselves to feel secure. He trusted what could be tested, not what felt comforting. And from that perspective, the universe is brutally honest. It does not reward effort, intention, or virtue with extra time. It simply responds to causes with effects. So why does this matter? Because once you understand that time doesn't guarantee meaning, you stop waiting for permission to create it. Meaning is not something hidden in the future, waiting for you to arrive. It's something assembled locally, temporarily through action, just like order in a physical system. Meaning exists only while energy is being spent to maintain it. The moment you stop engaging, it dissolves. That's why nostalgia hurts. You're not missing the past itself. You're missing the structure that once held meaning together. and that structure required constant effort, attention, and participation. Time didn't take it away. Entropy did. This reframes ambition completely. The goal isn't to outrun time or beat it or somehow win against it. That's a misunderstanding from the start. The goal is to build things, ideas, relationships, understanding, that are worth the cost of maintaining them, knowing full well they won't last forever. This is not pessimism, it's precision. Feynman often emphasized that uncertainty is not a flaw in our knowledge, it's a fundamental feature of reality, and time magnifies that uncertainty. You never know how long a structure will hold. A career, a belief, a civilization, even a self-image can collapse faster than it was built. Physics allows that. In fact, it favors it. So the only rational response is engagement, not attachment. You act fully, knowing outcomes aren't guaranteed. You care deeply, knowing permanence is impossible. That tension between effort and impermanence is not a tragedy. It's the engine of everything meaningful humans have ever done. When people say they want more time, what they usually mean is more control. But control was never on the table. What you actually have is influence. Small, local, temporary influence over how energy flows through your corner of the universe. That's enough. It's enough to learn something difficult. Enough to tell the truth when it costs you. Enough to create order where none existed before, even briefly. Physics doesn't promise that these things will last. It only allows them to happen. And that allowance is rare. So the deepest lesson here is not about clocks or equations or even time itself. It's about responsibility without guarantees, about choosing to act meaningfully in a universe that will not remember you for doing so. And if that sounds heavy, it shouldn't. It's liberating. Because once you stop expecting time to justify your life, you finally understand that the justification has always been your job. Time does not give you our actions value. Your actions give time a reason to matter. At the far edge of everything we've talked about, there's one last idea that Richard Feynman never tried to make comfortable. And that S, the idea that time does not care whether you understand it or not. It keeps working even when your explanations fail. And that's not a weakness of human knowledge. It's a reminder of its limits. We often behave as if understanding something fully would give us power over it. If we could just explain time completely, pin it down, reduce it to a final equation, then maybe we could relax. But physics teaches the opposite lesson. The deeper you go, the more clearly you see that reality is not obligated to make intuitive sense. Time doesn't owe us clarity. It only obeys its own rules. And even those rules are written in a language we only partially speak. This creates a psychological tension most people never confront directly. We want certainty, but we live inside a system that fundamentally resists it. So we fill the gaps with stories, destiny, timing. Everything happens for a reason. These ideas feel reassuring, but they are not conclusions drawn from evidence. They are emotional scaffolding, ways to steady ourselves in a universe that doesn't provide handrails. Feynman's approach was almost brutally honest here. He didn't pretend uncertainty was temporary or embarrassing. He treated it as the most accurate description we have. And when you apply that mindset to time, something important changes. Stop waiting for life to make sense before you act. Think about how much of life is postponed because of imagined future clarity. People delay decisions until the right time, as if such a moment is objectively defined and scheduled somewhere ahead. But physics doesn't recognize right time. It recognizes conditions. And conditions are always imperfect, always incomplete, always changing. So waiting for perfect understanding is the same as choosing not to act. This is where time becomes not just a physical concept, but an ethical one. Because every moment you hesitate, the universe continues without consulting you. Energy dissipates. Systems evolve. Opportunities decay. None of this is personal, but it is real. Once you accept that, responsibility becomes sharper. You can no longer hide behind confusion or complexity. Not knowing everything is no longer an excuse. It's the default state. Action has always been taken under uncertainty. Every experiment ever run was started without knowing the result. And that's the point. Feynman loved experiments because they embodied intellectual courage. You act, you observe, you adjust. You don't demand certainty first. You earn better understanding by engaging with reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. Life works the same way, whether we admit it or not. Time does not wait for you to feel ready. It waits for nothing, but it does allow feedback. You can learn. You can refine your approach. You can change direction. What you can't do is step outside the flow and negotiate terms. This dissolves one of the most persistent illusions people carry, that someday later, things will finally settle enough for them to begin. Physics offers no evidence for that future. Stability is always local and temporary. The only time you ever have to work with reality is now, under imperfect conditions, with partial information. That realization can feel unsettling, but it's also empowering, because it shifts the focus away from outcomes and back onto process. You are no longer responsible for controlling time. You are responsible for how you participate in it. And participation doesn't require grand gestures. It requires attention, curiosity, willingness to test ideas against the world instead of protecting them in your head. It requires accepting that mistakes are not a failure of intelligence, but a natural consequence of acting in a universe that doesn't reveal itself all at once. When you see time this way, urgency changes. It's no longer panic-driven. It becomes clarity-driven. You act not because the clock is threatening you, but because engagement is the only way meaning ever appears. And that leads to the quiet but powerful conclusion Feynman's thinking always points toward. Understanding is not something you wait for at the end of time. It's something you build moment by moment by daring to interact with a reality that doesn't promise answers in advance. So don't wait for time to explain itself to you. Use the time you have to ask better questions, and then have the courage to live inside the uncertainty of the answers.